Who wants to come over and say hi to Nima? He's up on the screen. humans up on the screen. Let's make him a bit. I know. I think he's in Texas.
Yes, yes. You could kind of. Yes. Let's tell That's not me. That's not me. Although I've heard that before. We know. We know. Oh, sweet. Thank you. Good choice.
That's sort of better.
Mike, with your jacket on the way it is, your t-shirt looks like it just says RV. Living that RV life. Oh. It's too spread out. It's too wide open. Right. We're just too big for this to be open. Am I right or am I right?
For the most part.
Right. One every month. I think what happened was during COVID also number one decided to do it, number two there were a couple of them. So well, what do you do? And then that's a little jack. Almost. Number one, I didn't know about it. Tippet's at my he told me about it. Look, the article is Meetup. 2013. Yeah. August. Still in those days when like augmentation had come out, so maybe it hadn't come out, like only like a handful of people had it. So most of the people who meet up had never tried VR and didn't have VR of their phone either. So it was like lines to try anything, right? It's like people were excited just to put it on and see floating cute, right? It was just cool movies. Yeah. I worked in video games for 8 years, and my games games since I was like 8. So for this, like I've known about VR from like cartoons and movies and stuff, and I've gone to places like Disney Quest where it's like, oh, you have to do this big installation of the VR system. It's way too expensive to have in your house. It's intriguing. Yes, I'm in. This is the time. Time's right. I can make this game now. But no, the games are not.
Okay, time for our speakers. So let's get you turned around.
Picking up criminals and dropping them into the police station. Yeah, that's another one. That, and then let's say calling and say, "Hey, you work for us?" And like, yeah, sounds great. Now I work on the actual one. I'm having a lot of fun. I like my team. Stay right. And they all every year yeah, you know people that know. So any information about not anymore. Save money, yeah. Back anymore, I don't even go to parties. Those are better. You can actually. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
People brought their so sweet. I was saying to Mike, you could say anything, but I think
Oh, yeah, demoted.
Well, no, that's true.
Yeah, that's true.
I appreciate it.
What part of this?
It's always better.
All right, you're the man. Yeah, exactly. Oh, we need this.
Every year.
It's much down here. It's much down here.
Yeah.
He's awesome.
Now you and Mike both have it. So, okay, cool. Yeah, or even if it just starts one more. Unless you want it. Yeah, it's easier. Oh, okay. Yeah, great. Yeah.
Hey guys, we're gonna get started. If you want to take a seat over here.
There are other people. Digital Wellbeing. Yeah. In fact, I have it in my backpack. I should get it out. Is this you?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe what I can do, can we have one seat in between?
I'm the hype cycle. The hype is here. Essentially. Right? Back in the tech. You gonna stream it too?
It's going.
Yeah. There's a lot of here.
Yes.
So you go different. You said you streamed some stuff on. Yeah, but hard.
Sorry to see so many new faces as well as a lot of people here. So thank you all for coming.
Your code chief figured out?
Is that anyone here?
Did you code chief?
For those of you who don't know, I'm Andrea. I am one of the co-organizers here at SVVR. Mike over here is live streaming to YouTube, so you guys will be able to see this later as well. DNA is one of our other organizers, and Elma, who unfortunately is not here tonight, she might pop in, is our fourth, and she also runs our work jams, which is sort of a monthly afternoon way to get together with other folks and just sort of make some progress on projects that you're working on, help other people out, get help if you need it. So we'll have those dates up on Discord as well. But for our program tonight, we have two amazing speakers, and then we'll have plenty of time for networking and pizza and demos afterwards as well. And right after our speakers, we do have some announcements, and then welcome you guys to come up and talk about what you're working on as well in community announcements. Just take a minute to let us know what's up. So our first speaker will be Angel Say. He is the co-founder and CEO, right, of Resolve. I'm going to let him, kind of take it away as far as what he is going to talk about. But just so you know, Resolve is applying XR to the construction and building space, which I find fascinating. I came from a company that was doing some of that more recently, and I know it's a very complicated and very staid industry. So I am very excited to hear what you were able to do with these guys. So welcome, Angel.
Thank you. Ideal place for me to stand. I'll go over here. All right, so my name's Angel. I am the CEO and co-founder of a company called Resolve. And what I'm going to focus the talk today on, and kind of hopefully prompt you all to ask me questions and whatever's most interesting for me to share, is how we've sort of ridden the XR hype cycle. So I've been in this space since 2014. Working on several iterations of this idea, different applications in different industries, obviously lots of different devices over those last 10 years. And finally we're at a point where we've hit a pretty good escape velocity, have found product market fit, and so I'm going to try to just uncover as much as I can about what I've learned grinding it out over the last 10 years to get to where we are today. I will sort of stick to this curve as a template for what I've experienced, and it actually maps pretty well to what I've gone through. If you haven't seen it before, it's just a representation of what it's like to actually find product market fit. In the beginning, you think you found it, but it's actually just that somebody published an article about you, and then you have to go through the trough of sorrow, and then you start to see signs of it working, but it's actually still pretty early, and then eventually it does start to work. Before we dive into it, I'll tell you a bit about myself. I actually recently moved to the Bay Area from New York City. Spent 15 years in New York City after going out to Columbia out there in 2009. Studied mechanical engineering and computer science out there, and did a lot of robotics research. Loved New York City, stayed out there. And actually before working in XR, I was working on factory automation software for the semiconductor industry. So we were building microscopes that helped large semiconductor fabs analyze the yield on their wafers. And so I was doing a lot of computer vision at the time and robotics, which is what I like to do. But then I caught the XR bug, and that's how I am where I am today. That's me in a clean suit. And I show this picture because it'll sort of tie back to what we're doing today, but spent some time in the weeds of these clean rooms, talking to the people who are operating these facilities, only to years later realize that the way these facilities are designed is not optimal for the people running them, and that actually leads to a lot of inefficient processes. All right, so I'm going to tell you a bit about my journey in the space in a couple of pictures. So maybe like many of you, my journey started with the DK1. I ordered a DK1, loved it, downloaded every app I could get my hands on. At the time, it was a free-for-all. You would just download whatever you found on the internet and run it on your computer and love it, make friends in VR that you never met before. And some of them I'm still friends with. Aiden's in the audience. We met in VR years ago, and now we're pretty good friends. And then I went to Hackathon in New York City, TechCrunch Disrupt, built a VR application for urban design, and I got first place, won several $1,000s of that check, plus a bunch of other stuff. And that sort of fueled and allowed me to quit my job and do XR full time. I was in my early 20s. It was the perfect time to do it. And then I went to my first Connect. If anyone, actually show of hands, who went to the Connect in Hollywood? Connect 1. All right. So the very first Connect in Hollywood, they demoed, Crescent Bay, right? The first time we had position tracking. There's the T-Rex demo. It was awesome. It got me hyped. I was so excited to do the industry. And then actually didn't go to a Connect until this most recent one, because I was actually literally just grinding it out, trying to make sure the company worked before I went out to these conferences. And then in January of 2015, we got into Y Combinator as one of the, actually really the first VR application and company to go through it. Before us, there had been Matterport, but they weren't really doing VR at the time. Now they do, it was more just 3D scanning. And we got in with the Gear VR app at the time. That's sort of where our focus was. And then that's us in our house in Mountain View. I did a brief stint in the Bay Area back in 2015. And that's what life was like for about 3 months while we went through YC. We wake up, climb out of our beds, go to this area here, and just build stuff until something worked. So we're going through YC at the time. We have a little bit of funding. Our idea is software for architects at that time to visualize spaces, a lot of retail, a lot of commercial architecture. And PB, Paul Buchheit, who was the creator of Gmail, he was one of the partners there. And I remember he told us, we had office hours with him, and he said, you guys are going to be in the woods for a really long time, and your job as founders is to make sure you survive, right? Like if we actually cared about this company and the vision, we just had to make sure we survived because it was still way too early. YC believed in us, PB believed in us, but they needed to make sure we lived for the hardware to allow a scalable company, because at the time it certainly did. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did. in the first 5 years of the company's life cycle to stay alive. On the right side are just a couple of pictures of the journey with that product, which was called SVVR. There's our first TechCrunch article when we were going through YC, where we were bringing 3D models into VR, and at the time, we made it easy. It was novel. We were excited. We got our first TechCrunch article, but then it didn't mean much in the grand scheme of things. It was just an article. At a high level, we did end up building that company or product to about $700,000 in ARR, which was no small feat, but it wasn't growing as fast as we wanted to, especially when we looked at other startups, at our other batchmates. Yeah, that was a milestone, but we needed to grow faster. And one of the big lessons that I learned early on was that I have a technical background, I know how to write code, but that's not enough. You actually have to go out and you have to sell your product, and you have to talk to the people who are using and paying for your product and understand what you need to do for them to pay you more, because them paying you is what's going to keep you alive. I think another important component here, especially being in XR, is there are a lot of distractions. There's a new headset, well, back then it was like every month. I think things have slowed down a little bit, but there's a lot of new devices, a lot of hype. You have to balance knowing where the puck is going and having conviction in some of those visions of the future that you believe in with the hype, right? You can't buy into every single piece of hype in XR, otherwise you end up building for a million different devices, a million different paradigms, and you're not really solving any one thing very well. And again, I think another XR specific thing, maybe this is a little more generally applicable, you have to remove friction at every single step of the process of people using your product. People putting on a headset is not an easy thing to do, and if they're going to do that, they can't then stumble on a bunch of problems on their way to use the headset, or even once they're in your app and trying to do interesting things that you've told them they can do. And so I think these were some of the guiding principles that early on helped us stay alive and try to find product market fit. I'd say we really didn't, but we had a pretty good team that was heads down trying to figure this out with us, and we did a lot of things that didn't scale. We would ship out headsets to people, we configure them in the office, and we really tried our best to get this to work. Part of it was, architects, it's a tough market to sell into. That's one of the lessons I learned, but that's not really an XR specific thing. And so in retrospect, when I look back at some of that time, I wanted to touch on two categories of things that I think would be helpful to share, because I think they're applicable to XR startups today. One is, what could have killed us? What did we avoid doing that I think could have ultimately led us to have wound down the company? Thankfully, we didn't. One is constant adapting to the headsets that came out. I think sometimes we got sucked into being as multi-platform as we could, but that's really expensive when you're an early stage startup. If I kind of rewind to 2017, there was the Vive, there was various versions of the Rift, then there were all the Windows mixed reality headsets, and then there were all these new standalone headsets. It's a lot for a small tech team to take on. And so if you're still really early, pick one and do one really, really, really well before you become a multi-platform app. There's also this tendency for companies to be open to piloting with you and to fund these pilots with innovation money, which can get you some early traction. But if you don't hit escape velocity out of those innovation departments, you're really just a marketing tool, right? These companies are paying you to seem innovative, but you're not actually solving a problem, and you can never break out of the innovation budgets. And when budget cuts come around, it's those innovation budgets that are the first to go. So you have to make sure to really, really get out of innovation land. The other important bit here, which we sometimes fell victim to, was selling the technology and not an actual solution to a hair on fire problem. And I think the hair on fire problem is really, really important, because the problem that you're solving actually has to hurt, right? And you can't just be selling VR apps. People will open their door to VR demos all the time. They're exciting, they're fun, but you need them to pay you and to stick around. And finally, the last one is the value that you provide has to be much, 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 much greater than them just choosing not to wear the headset and take the path of least resistance, because we really are battling a lot of friction and a lot of resistance to get people to put headsets on. And so whatever you are building in the headset better be really good. Otherwise, they will take the headset off and never come back. And then you'll never see them again, and you lose paying customers. On the right are some things that I think really didn't matter in the grand scheme of things, and maybe at the time we thought they did. One was we were outfunded by another competitor, almost 10x. They had raised maybe more than 10 million, and we had raised only 1 million. We're around, and they're not. We also thought we had to support every single headset in existence, because that would widen our market. I don't think that was a wise choice in retrospect, and I actually don't think it moved the needle. And finally, going to every single conference and meetup, it didn't move the needle for us, right? Unless you're selling like dev tooling, then yeah, sure, we should go to these things. But like I said, I hadn't gone to a Connect in almost a decade. Now I go back because I do have a purpose when I go to these partner events, but I generally was not very involved in the scene. All right, and so then we kind of got to the bottom of the trough there. That's me wearing a Go, and that's where things sort of really started to change. But there were a couple of challenges. People were wanting to view bigger and bigger 3D models. The headsets were getting weaker, not stronger, because we were now using Snapdragon chips. And people were burned out from years of having to set up Vives and wheel around, massive computers to do demos. But we had a network, and we kind of understood some of these problems, and so we decided to tackle them, but from a different angle. So now the talk will sort of shift gears to what we're doing at Resolve today before I open it up to some questions. And this is it. Every year in construction, people waste $650 billion doing rework of things that could have been fixed if someone had understood the design. If you've ever done a home remodel or a simple project, you probably built it and then realized, crap, that's not what I actually wanted. Now imagine the thing that you're building is a data center or a EV battery factory. Then the stakes are a lot higher. But it's too late if you're finding it out in the field. And so there's a ton of waste that happens because people are out there realizing it for the first time, or they're trying to solve it like this, by looking at a 3D model on the screen. That is just begging for VR to solve the problem. And what you don't want, like I said, is to go out and say, well, why does it look like this? And someone says, oh, it was in the drawings, but you didn't understand what you were looking at. So we had a problem, which I just described, but there was also a technical problem in the way, which was the VR could clearly help, but the models were too big for the software and hardware at the time, and we knew if we wanted it to scale, it had to run on standalone hardware. So we built Resolve, and we spent the first 2 years working on a 3D engine so that you could open massive files, 1 billion polygons on a standalone headset with no tethered GPU, no GPU on the cloud. We do it all locally so that we can help people do meetings like this, where they're all wearing a headset or they're just at their desk and they're walking to a building that doesn't exist. I'm going to play a short video here that highlights a bit about what we do and how one of our customers does it.
In the construction industry, billions of dollars are wasted on issues that weren't caught early enough. But with MetaQuest, we're able to catch issues before concrete even forms. Wow, every time. With MetaQuest and using Resolve, we're now able to have the team walk the project before anything's even there.
Resolve is a three-dimensional model platform that we use on MetaQuest. We're able to identify the issues.
Yeah, it's definitely too low.
Get the solution figured out, and then we don't have to tear it out and reinstall it.
On one project, we did the math on one issue. It would have cost us over $25,000 had we caught it later. And on that specific project, there were over 600 issues. It's so much more valuable than trying to describe something on a phone call or sharing a screen. I don't even know how I could quantify the time savings with that.
So we're getting to the end here, but this is what some people are finding with Resolve today. Everything from safety risks to accessibility issues. The maintenance people who are going in and auditing these things so that they're not discovering them for the first time out in the field. I'm happy to talk more about our tech. I'll be here, or if you want to ask me questions about it. I didn't want to focus on that too much because I thought the overall journey was more interesting. But this this is where we are now. We're solving an industry problem. We've solved a really hard technical problem, and that's really allowed us to scale. And we iterated to our first $1 million in ARR at the beginning of last year, and we did it by solving one thing really, really well, listening to our customers and not random people on Twitter or every VC that we met, and selling to people with problems, not just innovation teams. And I think most importantly, finding a hard problem in a big market and solving it at all costs. And so now we're beyond that $1 million in ARR, and it's all about just distribution and getting into as many general contractors and projects as possible, and building out a team that will help us do that. And it's a great time to be doing this because if you don't know, we are building tons of data centers and manufacturing facilities in America right now and really across the world. And the stakes are higher than ever to make sure that we don't blow all this money on the stakes. So thanks for listening. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. How do we do questions? Do we just...
Questions?
Thanks for the great talk. I think the second to last slide said, allow your happiest customers to sell to you. Is that meant to say let them sell
For you, yes, for you.
That makes sense.
Thanks for paying attention.
So when you guys are starting out, does anyone of you have like construction or like engineering, like construction engineering background? How did you identify these problems?
So I have a mechanical engineering background, so a little bit. I alluded to spending some time in the semiconductor fab, so I've also been around some of the operations folks. But when we first started, we had zero architecture experience, and it was just about not being afraid to email people, to show up at the offices and do demos. And then obviously after a few years in the industry, we kind of built up a pretty good Rolodex, but no, none of us were insiders, so to speak.
I can help with that since I do something very similar to you.
Perfect.
When I'm doing the type of stuff he's doing, I have a smart person sitting right next to me. And when the client asks me something that I don't know how to answer, I turn to the smart person and go, can I do that? And the smart person answers the question. I assume
now we also have GPT.
Do you combine anything with like the 3D printing or anything with like Bjarke Ingels and Icon? Do you have any sort of ethic component of what you look at in a construction project when you select it?
No, so maybe I can talk about the product a little more, but we're not a VR shop, so we're not doing any of this manually. People go on the website, they upload their 3D models, their construction models that they already have, and it happens completely automatically. So we're not actually auditing it. It's sort of self-selecting. A lot of our customers are super industrial right now, like I said, data centers, factories, pharma facilities. It's honestly, you mentioned Bjarke Ingels. They're not sexy buildings, right? They're pretty ugly concrete buildings with lots of pipes, but the stakes are really high because if you mess up the design, it's not just an eyesore, it is OpEx, it is clean drinking water that people can't get, drugs that we can't manufacture. So it's a slightly self-selecting type of customer, I would say.
Okay. And to follow up on the second or third slide, you said, diversifying for different headsets is kind of a mistake. If people want to be browser-based, do you say, no, we need to go in headset?
It's a good question. We were super opinionated for a few years to say we are a VR product first, right? Like because we think that provides 10x value over what you're doing today. If you want to look at it on a browser, you have tons of apps that do that. Our philosophy has changed a little bit now because we have realized there is value to that web component or to desktop as a way to funnel people into VR. And also some people just can't get into VR for many reasons. And so we do have a desktop component now. We are still pretty strongly opinionated that you're going to get more bang for your buck if you put the headset on, and we encourage people to do so. But yeah, we don't think of ourselves as a VR company anymore.
Thank you.
Is it only for design stage, or do you have a support during the construction as well?
Yeah, so most of our customers are actually using it during construction. So between design and actual like pouring of concrete, there's a step called pre-construction where you do coordination. Think, you have a design from the mechanical folks, from the electrical folks, from structural, and you have to bring that all together and make sure it works. That's where they bring us in to make sure before they go and pour the concrete out, they're not going to regret it. And so it's happening all the way from like the late stages of design through the minute you pour concrete. Once you pour concrete, it's built, you're going to have to rip it out. But we basically tell them, we are like an insurance policy. Like, you want to use this up until the last minute.
A lot of infrastructure exists outside of concrete, so it still happens throughout the construction.
Yeah, it's just a metaphor. The concrete's just a metaphor.
Okay. That's why I just see a lot of use of it actually during the construction.
Yeah, so I think in the future, tons of potential for AR as well. I think the potential for AR in construction is to really like solve the labor shortage, right? That anyone could show up on a job site, put on a headset, and just follow IKEA instructions to build a data center. Obviously, that's generalizing it, but that's the idea. I think right now, a lot of people do misuse AR to do what we're doing, but on site, right? To go out to the job site, overlay the model and be like, oh, oops, we put it in the wrong place, or that's inaccessible. The field is the wrong time to be discovering those things. You should have done that in the office when you were designing, not putting on a headset, walking on the job site and realizing, ooh, we should move this door, 3 feet to the left. And so I do think a lot of people think that's a good use of AR, but really if you solved it way earlier, it would have also been cheap.
And then more like matching of what is meant to be and what is.
Yeah,
A lot of
100%.
mistakes are because of.
Yes, I think like construction quality will skyrocket once we have better devices that you can use on the job site.
Huge kudos to surviving for 10
Thank
years.
you.
And there's a lot of similarities. My company started about 10 years ago. We never took VC money, never paid, we still have never paid for a booth at the trade show. And particularly not going to XR trade shows, try to find your customers instead. So I don't have as much a question as like huge kudos, a lot of similar lessons, and finding that product market fit is really magical for you. So amen.
Thank you, and kudos to you as well for surviving.
So my wife's a construction manager, and I'm just curious, I imagine if she was really keen to use you guys, and then she also needs to get her team on board and their managers, how do you go about the institutional change to get the whole team using your product?
It's a great question, and I will also hopefully get your contact info so that, yeah, perfect. That is why the standalone component was so important to us. Like I didn't tell this part of the story, but around like 2019, when Inside VR wasn't growing as fast as we wanted to, we reevaluated everything and said we're going to take one last like big swing, and that big swing will be if we can get these models to work on standalone headsets, it's actually scalable and it'll be really easy for anyone to use. But that was the standard that we set for ourselves. If it required people to like wheel in a laptop, it's dead on arrival. If you have to call IT to set it up, it's dead on arrival. We want, let's say, your wife to go to our website. If you have a Quest at home, try it on, and then bring the Quest to the job site the next day and say, hey, I have our model in here, right? Come check it out. And she's a construction manager. She's not an IT person. She's not a BIM person, not a CAD person, but she was able to download our app on store, upload a model, no issues, and now just organically onboard the rest of the team. And I think one of the most surprising things we've learned, and that people don't believe us about, is our power users are actually not who you'd expect, right? They are people who aren't spending all day in 3D. They are the superintendents, the field team, the maintenance workers who have been totally let down by traditional 3D software. Like they don't know what WASD is. They're not going to spend the time to learn how to control, alt, middle, scroll, wheel, click to pan around the model. They just want to go in and find issues and get back to their jobs because their job is also extremely critical. So in terms of buy-in, the ease of use of the tech was so important. And there's a lot of hard rendering tech behind the scenes, but the purpose of that hard rendering tech is to actually make the tech completely invisible and make the building and the building review the core part of the product.
How do you look at where the puck is going now? What is your company looking like in 3 years, 5 years? And how is that changing? How are you thinking today?
Yeah, I think that changes regularly, and I think it's important to sort of reevaluate where the puck is going. A year ago, if you had told me that Meta Ray-Bans or these types of devices would be an important part of the equation, I probably would have said no. Now I'm actually convinced that yes, some field workers will be wearing Meta Ray-Bans on the job site, and they are really helpful. Maybe you don't need displays to provide value. So I think that's one of the things that we've been looking at. Obviously, there's the AI element, but AI on its own, right? Like to me, it's just like using SQL, or it's a tech that you're going to use, right? You have to use it. And I think we think a lot about, we don't necessarily want people spending more time in VR or in headsets, we just want them to be more productive. And so if in 5 years, that means they can just upload a building to our platform and we've found the issues for them and you can fix them, great, right? Then maybe the VR headset just for a light audit. So we're excited about the headsets and what they enable, but we don't think that ultimately people have to be wearing these devices all the time.
Trimble told me they're using robot dogs on construction sites to look for safety issues and all sorts of stuff. Have you thought about, because you have a lot of 3D skills building a VR company, have you thought about branching off into robots on the job site and merging the two?
Yeah, I think we're positioning ourselves in a way where we're coming in so early in the process that the 3D model then lives on our platform, and these robots need that 3D data, right? To like know where to get around. Obviously, they have computer vision to do it on their own, but it helps a lot if they know, hey, what's behind this wall? Because they can't see that, right? But the 3D model has that information. And so we do think a lot about, hey, how is the data that we have on our platform eventually going to get out into the field? That might be AR headsets, that might be robotic dogs. In construction especially, there's a lot of 3D scanning that happens on the job site so that you know what you're building every day, and you can do automated progress tracking. And some of our customers do that. They bring the scan into our platform to then say, okay, what did we model out, and what do I actually have on the job site? I don't need to travel out there. I can just remotely walk through and compare. So I do think, a strong 3D platform early in the design and the pre-con process lends itself to a lot of impact on the job site.
Thank you for sharing your journey. I think one of the things which everyone talks about in VR is they always start with the visualization. So having worked for furniture companies and VRs, I understand that how you start out with architects. So the question is, when you talk to the construction tech or data centers, what is it actually gets to the foot in the door, and is it the actual product they always adapt, or you see any different variations, or where do they actually see the value the most?
Okay, two really interesting points. One, if you notice in our product demo, we are not doing photorealistic rendering, and we are not trying to do it anytime soon, and it also hasn't mattered. Maybe I should have made that a point, right? That like, for us especially, the fidelity has not mattered for our customer base because they are not looking for things like material choices. But I think with our first product, it mattered a lot, right? When we were selling to retail, to commercial, to people who were like finishes, that was the thing you were evaluating. With this current product, it's where's the pipe, where's the valve, where are the boxes on the wall? Those are the only things that matter. And then we also have, you can click on the elements and get metadata about them. So point there is the visualization doesn't even matter. It's not even a question, right? Like they will see that product and they'll want to try it, not because of the way it looks, but because of the story we're telling, which is, hey, what if you could find that inaccessible valve before you got out to the job site? And I think in construction and in a lot of industries, I think people forget also, you're solving this problem with like quantifiable ROI, but there's also people at the end of the problem, and they also want to go home earlier, right, to see their families. They want to get home safely, and they don't want to work in unsafe job sites. And so I think that is one of the narratives that also helps us is, hey, instead of spending all this time out in the field fixing issues that the designer should have fixed, what if we could get you in earlier and avoid those things? So right now we're at a point where we're just like, the hook is, hey, we have these examples, we have these case studies where they save millions of dollars, you can too, and also people are building data centers faster than humanly possible, and I think they don't want to take the move fast and break things approach. They want to move fast, but it also has to be high quality, because if you cut corners, especially in data centers, it means you pay the price for the downtime later on, and nobody likes that. And so our pitch to them is like, look, we will help you deliver this thing faster, and if you use our product, it'll be a high quality project that you deliver.
Get one more and then we'll call it.
Exactly.
How do you see this being part of like a design process in other parallel industries? What industries do you think like gonna make this VR visualization or a way to like analyzing the design part of a design process? What's your take on that?
You mean like non-construct, like non-building?
Yeah, non-construction.
I think Mike had a good example, right? Like some of the stuff that he does. There's like general anything that you experience, right? I think is something that can really derive value from VR walkthrough or review. I know there are products out there that also do like automobile review. In automobile design, ergonomics are really important. And so if you can jump into a headset and get into the driver's seat and see, is it comfortable? Can I reach certain things? That I think people do that with Gravity Sketch. Yeah, generally, I'm of the opinion that like anywhere people are using 3D software on their desktop, you should be using VR somewhere in that life cycle, because it is not enough and it's not easy to communicate 3D with other people who don't spend all day using 3D software.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone for the question.
So next up we have Krause. She is a long-term friend of SVVR. She is a lecturer at Stanford. She is a book author. She has a new book out called Digital Wellbeing. And she has her own company called MindWise. And that's one of the key ways you can engage with her. I'm very excited to have her join us. I was lucky enough to attend her session at AWE last year in Long Beach. And it really opened my eyes, and hopefully this will do the same for you. She just has a way of resetting how you think about creativity, how you approach the way you think about what user experience really is in the broader context of the world. That sounds really big, but Caitlin is kind of amazing, and so hopefully you enjoyed the session.
Kind of.
I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you for that beautiful introduction. And I was setting up, and I think that tonight I wanted everybody here to feel like this is not a talk. This is an experience. Just like Angel said, everything that matters to us emotionally, we tend to have an experience related to it. So this is one of my favorite communities because we walk the walk, and we're building in VR. And it has to be about wonder. It's usually about us dreaming about something and then making it possible. So to dwell in that state of wonder, especially while there's gravity in the world, I wanted to bring a feeling of levity to this time tonight. So this talk is for you specifically, and everything that I bring up, feel free to experience it yourself, see how it feels, see how you react. Hopefully leave a little calmer, because it is about well-being. And I will leave space for questions too. I really loved that we got to ask Angel some of the backstories and have that. So that's the intention. And on that note, I wanted to start creatively with VVR, which is virtual reality. So we can't do this in a headset. You need to close your eyes. So I'm going to just ask you to trust and ride the ride and close your eyes and just imagine a world. VVR. Imagine a place that brings you a feeling of peace, a feeling of wonder. Could be outside, could be inside. As you imagine this place, inviting you to take a deeper breath. And exhale slower than you're breathing in. So your exhale is longer. And this could be a place that you've visited before, or it could be a place in your imagination that you're making up. And just see if you can look around you in 360 and look up and look down. And just imprint what it feels like to be in that space. Notice the sounds. Notice how the air feels. And notice if you're alone or with other people. And when you're ready, you can come back from BVR to this physical space just gently and feel what it feels to arrive. And for me, part of being lucky enough to speak here tonight is to enjoy the ride and not just rush to the destination. And part of my background is as a photographer. So I came to VR from loving photography. And specifically, how many other people love photography and that kind of brought you into this world? Yeah. So using different types of cameras, some classic, some modern, some digital, some not. This was a picture I took on the edge of Lake Geneva, and I found if I got really low, then something about the flowers looked like ballet to me, or something about the light, it brought me alive. I've been teaching and working overseas for a decade. I have a background in programming and also in education, and an MFA in creative writing and storytelling. So there's a lot of hybrids that were starting to come together back in 2015. I got my press credentials and started covering different film festivals and shooting in 360. So part of today is talking about living in the layers, like living in the layers of what makes us notice details, what makes us feel like we come alive. You know, we're not just lazy river walking through life. And what I found is that being alive in the world really made me question what's possible for the future. I'm a futurist, so working with all of these extended technology type of applications made me question, well, how do I want to be and how do I want to help shape the future, and what can I do using XR to give people a better sense of freedom? So today, 3 intentions for our talk tonight, on top of leaving time for questions, is to share more of those backstories and those layers that brought me to where I am. It's a big year for me with things that are happening right now in the world of well-being. Second intention I named, it's for each of you out there to leave with a little seed of well-being. And this is deeper than, I know that the beginning was a little bit like a guided meditation, but it's not paint by number. So, you know, hopefully what I'm sharing, I teach digital well-being at Stanford. I teach about healthy relationships with technology, and I'll share more. I have my own company in design, and as I'm doing a lot in the world, again, experiencing it is what matters. And right now, it's humans and robots together. So, leaving with a new idea is the other intention. The long view intention is that there's something big at stake. So for us together, because I feel that solidarity in our group, that we can share what's the big picture? What are we in it for in this long game? How can engagement be deeper than what places like Tristan Harris and Asa Raskin, if you know the Center for Humane Technology, they talk about relationships with media being the base level of the brainstem. There's so much out there that addicts us and leaves us hungry and wanting more. So I found myself thinking a lot about wonder and resilience and that deeper connection that leads to our thriving. So a little background about me and my journey. I've been working in different forms of XR for 2 decades. The company that I founded has its 10-year anniversary this year. It's called MindWise. And I founded it when I was living overseas in Switzerland. So I've been living in Zurich. I moved there from Brussels. My parents were in the Foreign Service. We were always moving to different places when I was growing up. And so I had to get curious or I would be afraid. So my background, I wanted to be an astronaut. If you're also wanting to be an astronaut and you've had a disqualification for eyesight. That's what I went through. So I did some of the training and then had that change of path. And in the course of the past 10 years, I've written 6 books. 3 of them are nonfiction, 3 are fiction. And I tend to do a lot of applied research into topics that have to do with mindfulness, but they're not siloed. So Mindful by Design was written for people who were doing curriculum planning and education and said, well, I don't have time for social emotional learning. I don't have time for mindfulness. I just have to get my job done. And I noticed that learners weren't able to get curious and do things in fab labs if they didn't feel safe. So I started to focus on applied well-being and mindfulness and connection, and then use a lot of the computing technology to start to build environments that had to do with wonder and awe. So that led me to this book, Digital Wellbeing, that came out last year. It took a year of research and work compiling everything because I knew there'd be readers that would take it, and so the science had to be legit, all the background. And when this book came out, the publisher said, let's have the cover be a robot arm meets a human arm, you know, and that's a theme, right? It's a trope. And I said, no way, because this cover needs to be about imagination and wonder and the different angles and facets. And digital can't be digital text, and well-being cannot be Comic Sans or some flowy font. So this mission and vision is still growing, but I feel like after being in the writing cave for a year, it's nice to be out in the world now and really questioning. I didn't mention AI until right now, but some of the premise of the book is that there's AI right now that's powering systems. It's used in both back end and front end and everything that we're automating and beyond. And the magic word is agentic this year. But you know, what about human thriving, and what about our ability to choose and not see things as binary? So for me, it's not about well-being through leaving the digital and going into the woods, but it is about honoring nature and honoring our own layer stack as biological at the same time that we're augmenting with a lot of the digital tech. So this is an example of a world that I've built that's a moon garden, where the light is kind of catching the waves and you can be there by yourself or with other people, you know, just to feel a better sense of capacity. One of my previous books was about wonder, specifically for designing in VR. And when that came out in 2020, it was the pandemic. So we had the book launch with other humans in avatars in what you might recognize as alt states. Yeah, sad but happy. And I felt like Alice in Wonderland. I was standing on a book. My attention was there, so that was real for me. Side note, I feel like there's a third space, and this is it, and it's the future. The first space is our physical reality. The second one is our imagination. And the third space is when you can have your imagination come alive and you share it with other people. And there's that collective effervescence of everybody reacting to each other and responding. So as I've been exploring applications that still go back to metaverse beyond buzzwords, but what does it mean to incorporate things that are sensory and soulful and storied and somatic? For me, it's a lot more than just having a shared spatialized social world, because usually when people are in an experience with me, they're coming into VR and their first question is, why am I here? Like, what am I supposed to do? Second question is, where am I? Location. And then the third question usually is, who am I? And you start to realize, oh, we're all kind of embodying different shells and applications, and maybe we contain multitudes that come alive in these environments. So I'm bringing up a lot of different things in this kind of shorter talk that wants space for questions. I brought in these questions because last week I was advising a company that is dealing with a lot of clients who have questions about AI and questions about VR. And these were some of the questions specific to digital well-being that came up in this power session where I was leading them as a subject matter expert for a couple hours. And I think a lot of these questions are going to become more and more important as we get to use cases where well-being might be compromised if we don't think about the augmentation of human potential and not replacing it. You know, earlier you were saying, I believe that Angel was saying that human performance, it's about improving performance, but you can't perform if you're not thinking about the accessibility, the benefits, and the fact that people don't feel left out of the equation. And so it ends up being, in my mind, a really layered approach where if more people can recognize that right now we're moving into the most exciting phase. We were living in the most awkward phase to be human, where we were hunched over our phones and we were squinting at computer screens. And now we're moving into this approach where we can choose. We can choose to wear the meta ray bands or not. We can choose to go into a headset or to stay in our physical form. And that's why part of the talk tonight is about that power of embodiment. And if I stare too long at this, I sort of get, dizzy and just kind of sucks you in. But I do think sometimes we jump so fast into the application, and it's the before and after of the hero's journey that is pretty exciting. So tonight, as we're trying out different headsets and testing out, that's part of why I love SVVR, because we try things and get playful together. Speaking of play, one of the big applications of well-being that I'm excited about is neurodiversity and the ability to use synesthesia, so the ability to see sounds as colors or do things in VR that let people express themselves in a different way. So I have a lot of different programs where I do creativity immersives or workshops for teams and have people in groups communicating in ways where they translanguage. So if you think about how you like to learn and how you like to express yourself at all ages, we're kids in bigger bodies, and sometimes these worlds can be way more colorful and fun and expressive once we start to dream big. And this is a group where when the book came out, I thought, again, every time you have a text, like you have this physical book, physical books are, I think, awesome. They're real. It feels very tangible. And yet, sometimes this becomes a paperweight, or this becomes something where people want to digest it in a different way and share and get dynamic about it. So we had an experience inside of VR where we could play with some of the ideas and the exercises. This is in Engage, if you're curious. Yeah. So, in sum, there are lots of places and companies, and there are groups where, right now the QR code leads you to my newsletter, and I can share that with this group afterwards if you're curious. My website is my name, and it's easy to see about things scaling in a big way. These ideas can take off when people learn how to connect and collaborate in different ways, but it doesn't really mean anything without the individual, the person who's feeling something different and connecting. I mean, the book and all of the research ends up having an interlude here by Rodney Mullen, the skateboarder, and we were talking about flow states, and we were talking specifically about flow and what it means to really feel present, and proprioception. So Rodney and I became friends. He's been involved in AR applications, and humans like to predict themselves in time and space a little bit into the future, and you need to play with your environment and feel surprised. So a lot of the research that went into this book was not being as clinical about it. You'll have people talk about flow states. Stephen Kotler, who's done great work researching flow, will say, oh, we need to optimize it. You can always, you have to cycle. That's true, but sometimes if you're looking at what sparks human imagination, it's also that power of the unknown and staying curious and open. So part of the research that went into the book was what leads to the best curiosity and the best openness that leads a human to having an epiphany with XR involved in the equation, but not replacing our human ability to react in each moment. Yeah, and I could get more into chapters, and I brought at least 2 or 3 books with me, and if people want to take a look, then I have some here. But I wanted to have this unsession just to talk about those topics of embodiment, what it means to be physically embodied as we love VR and applied tech, what it means to honor well-being beyond prescriptions and beyond just saying this is the 7 steps to well-being, because I don't operate like that, and I think anyone else who wants to get clinical about it ends up feeling like it's not real to them. And the third, to be someone that celebrates wonder doesn't have to mean rainbows and butterflies. It can mean that, but it can also mean to dwell in a state of possibility using something elevated. This emotion fires on the opposite end of the spectrum to anger. And there's certainly enough anger right now in the world. So it's a question of what emotion do we want to feed, and how can we encourage ourselves to have more experiences that let us get there. So I feel like I'm speaking to the family that already gets that, and I'm happy to have time now to answer questions. Thank you. Yeah, really playful about this. Yes.
I was just paging through your book, and I saw the word design on literally every page, and you have lots of techniques and tips.
Yeah.
What would you say to the world that is building it for a 2D world today, because we're looking at our phones or tablets or laptops? What would you hope that they do as we move into this 3D world that's coming?
Yeah.
We're all there, but there's
Thanks
people
for,
watching.
I know. There's people watching, people who don't know. First off, I think, spend 4 minutes on each question.
No, there's only 4 people.
There's only 4
Okay.
It's recorded, right?
And more, yeah. So design is such a good word, I think, because sometimes design used to mean we have designs, like sort of like Shakespeare, like he has a design. It can mean that you have some ill will. I see design in a really positive way, of linking intention with people's ability to experience something in the future for themselves and others. So that's the best way I can explain it. If I'm teaching, which I am, when I'm teaching, say, a course at Stanford, people come in and sometimes they're CS majors, it's an elective, so they could be a nursing student. They could be somebody that's coming in and they quickly say to me, I want to design an app and I want it to be super popular. And I say, well, have you experienced what you want to build for? And have you gone out, with the proverbial clipboard and asked people on the street, like, what they think? Because there's a lot of theories with design that actually might not stick if they're not put in practice. So I feel like the premise is design is based on curiosity and not trying to prove something, and that it's imagining. That's why it's a perfect coupling with architecture, because it's imagining a future that someone else is going to experience in a 3D form. And you're right, 2D is not the way that our brain thinks best. Our brain attaches to objects, and we are object-oriented storytellers. So the more that people can think in 3D when they're designing, the more, they're able to think about symbolism and memory palaces and using data in new ways and having fun, right? If it's not fun, what's going to make people want to come back to it? So I think about Nicole and the 4 keys. If everything's just automated and I had no idea that was going to happen, then I'm not alive. So I guess the long and the short of it is that when you design, I think it gives you a chance to step outside of yourself and let your ego go, because it's about more than you. And wonder can be that secret superpower that lets me be liminal and say, well, I'm Caitlin, but I'm also Jason, and I might be somebody else too. Like it's not me versus another person. You could just go on and on, sorry. It's a deep question. Yeah. Hi.
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 It's amazing. So wonder is such a fabulous thing in VR. Those of us who've been around a while, I might probably put 1,000 people through their first VR experience. We call it taking their VR virginity, or we used to, where people just see something that is just so beyond what they could have ever experienced. My first real VR experience was in a Gear VR, believe it or not, at an event in the city. And it was sitting and looking at just a 3D video, right, above the Golden Gate Bridge, with the wind blowing in the grasses. But the window was open. I had this experience of the winds physically touching me at the same time. And that was just a sense of wonder for your first time to experience that.
Yeah.
So I want to share that, and just obviously I made my company Flow, because that's such an experience of being your higher self in a way that is not just a relaxed, oh, I'm in space. It's you're accomplishing an amazing task while you're there. So my question is, how would you define the word cool?
Okay, so I wanted to interrupt multiple times, because chances are when you need to face people, what do you think your mouth was doing when you had your first experience there?
Just like, yeah.
Probably wide open, like the Palmer Lucky face. Yeah. Yeah.
It's just like your whole body is alive.
So I call that wonder face, and it's embarrassing, when people have a headset and their mouths are wide open, but the body mirrors what's happening, which is also why people build cathedrals with this huge transept, because when you open up, then you start to feel wonder, it's sort of like you're priming for that. So the fact that we're so open is another reason that I treat a user journey. I would play a mentor, and I need to establish safety, because we're so open and vulnerable. And it's a great question that you're getting to, because I think that it's also a primer for human epiphanies without forcing it, but people can't perform and problem solve if they're not that open. They might be great at just, forcing out a solution, but it's a lot better, I think, when you have that feeling, not just of safety, but that feeling of possibility and play and openness. And your question again? Ask me again.
How would you define the word cool?
How would I define the word cool? I mean,
it's a hard question.
I know, and it's harder too, right? Because I was born in Boston, so I want to combine it with wicked right before. Like, what's wicked cool? Wicked cool is when something can't be. I feel like cool literally has its origins in jazz. I feel like this came, and you're nodding, yeah? I feel like it was Miles Davis.
It was a reaction to things being called hot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like cool is like the opposite of that.
Yeah, because I like music, so I'm thinking about the origins of cool. I think if we look it up, it has some kind of jazz blues origin. And so I think about music, and I think about people who feel like they're on the in. And one of my theories is that we're living in a world of maybe social shibboleths, where we have little codes for things, and we can say them to people, and it's really cool when you understand the etymology. Like, if you know the layers, then you know that I'm dropping something that would come from the 1980s, even if people now understand that it's all a derivative. You know what I mean? Like, cool is more than perform. Cool is like, we get that, and that's why.
It sounds like describing threads. What you just described is threads.
Right.
Cool. Something's cool, and you can see its threads to other places.
And you're signaling it because you see it, like the surface of an iceberg. I wasn't in Hollywood for OC1, but I wish I had been, and I'm sure there's some cool things that we could drop about it that happened, that then other people would, so that's what cool means to me.
I have no definition, I like your,
Okay.
so, the definition that I think applies beyond technology is mastery and control. So our brains love to control our world. So when you think about Iron Man flicking, Tony Stark flicking atoms and go, oh, that's so cool. It's because he's accomplishing something, but he has total control over the environment. But it could be a skateboard trick, which is cool. It's not technology at all. It's that total control over gravity and whatever. And so bringing that to me, we've been trying to bring that into VR every way we can, especially with AI. It becomes magic. And we've got something else that you really talk about and understand so well, which is making technology human. Where you no longer, all the interfaces disappear and you can see what you want, you can tell the AI to give you what you want and manipulate it. And it just feels so much more human than what we struggled with for so long and flat screens.
So humans have mirror neurons, and we could be nervous, right? Like you hold out your hand, it could be shaking. But cool, you just made me think, is like, I also used to play basketball, still do sometimes, but there's a term like ice water in your veins, sang-froid, meaning cold blood. Like you can be cool about something because you still feel the intensity of what matters, but you're even about it. And that's something where I don't think AI can replace that because there might not be as much at stake, right? Like you have that energy because there's something at stake. Yeah, we'll do a riff about cool later. Are there other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, my question is, do you think there's necessarily conflict between the digital apps that try to connect people and real human connections, because we're now more connected than ever and the loneliness is at its peak, right? So can we build an app that actually brings people closer together without like having this bad side effects?
So there's a quote, if you want to measure the outcomes, look at the incentives. And I agree with that. I think it's Charlie Milburn. As you're designing an app, and there is a chapter in the book about mindful design, like mindful game design for well-being, app design for well-being. If you're incentivizing for engagement, then you might have things like streaks, and you might have things like awards and trophies and extrinsic motivation. Or if you had, like your question, a social component, then if it has to do with something where there are likes or there's some kind of social clout, well, you have to do a lot of testing because there's a fine line between someone feeling freedom. People want to know sometimes, how am I doing it right? They want to get some feedback that gives them support. I tend to like experiences that are layered and evolved so that someone sees more parts of a map revealed, and that's part of what they consider engaging without the need to have social proof or some kind of engagement that gives them a feeling of, oh, I need to check this, or, I don't know if you followed Duolingo, that it died. So bad. People, yeah, the owl. So the Duolingo game is teaching. Does anyone know this case? Like this story? Yeah. So I found that demotivating. Like, oh, the character dies if you don't do this every day. Yeah, and the kind of flip side of well-being is habits. I teach. One of my colleagues is BJ Fogg, who wrote Tiny Habits, and there are some habit-forming things that are great with well-being. But I think energy-wise, if it doesn't leave you feeling like you have more energy, and you start to feel guilty if you don't do something, then it's a negative game design. Yeah, so it's a great question, and I think more people need to pay attention to it, and also pay attention to the shared co-spaces where people can feel ambiently supported by other people without needing to have so much noise. Thank you. Yeah.
Is there anything you would leave these folks with as far as, you know, are that they could be working into their daily lives or
A lot of things. I would want to have, I mean, I would want to talk for longer, to do more, to jump up and do things at tables, and we can do that maybe sometime in the future. Just thanks for playing. The first thing that I want to mention is I think everybody closed their eyes, which is a huge, I didn't know if you would. It made me a little nervous. I was thinking, okay, a lot of people think, oh, I'm not a mindfulness person or well-being person. So I would say that's the first idea that's a seed that sometimes when I meditate, I actually go swimming and I'm just focusing on how one little finger feels as it's going through the pool. And then I'll think about things like how all of me feels, and I'll kind of tune in and tune out. So to answer you, I think that maybe being involved in VR and XR gives us a spatial superpower where we're already thinking of ourselves in 3D. So your ability to tune into your own physical body and take care of it is even more important. So the second tip I would say is to pay attention to movement. I was part of a Columbia study called the Body Electric last year. And in the study, we had a control group that just treated work as the same, and the test group moved every 30 minutes. But it didn't have to be movement like a long walk. It could be just standing up. So standing up and stretching, and then continuing work. So sort of like having a timer that reminds you. Lowered blood sugar, lowered all kinds of biometrics. And I was so surprised because I'm somebody that actually goes into flow state and I have to have a sticky above my computer saying, remember to blink, remember to breathe. You know, because I get so into things that I lose track of time until the sun goes down. Yeah, so if you're somebody like me that gets super focused and into flow state, remember to move. Remember that we're people that might be carrying extra weight in a headset on our heads, so you might be more prone to neck pain. And it sounds so simple, but once I started doing those little changes, like focusing on quality of the pillow I sleep on at night, life just improved a lot. And here I am doing digital design, and I'm designing in VR and XR, but paying more attention to my physical layer stack just helped me feel like I could thrive more in the world. And anyone who wants to talk about metabolism, I took a metabolism class for fun and learned wacky, wild things that I'd never thought of before, that were all about energy states throughout the day. So little bonus, there's a chapter in there of Digital Wellbeing where I talk with Esther Perel, and she calls AI artificial intimacy, and there's a huge debate now about onboarding into therapeutic applications, like can we use AI? Is AI not able to provide therapy? And that's what I'm thinking about right now. And I would say to people, you know, I don't like to weigh in saying this is the way, this is not the way, but I will say there's a shortage of really quality therapists, and there are a lot of people who need onboarding and being brought into a system. So sometimes AI can be that first contact that can help a lot. And I think there are all kinds of applications for therapy using XR. It can be amazing. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Caitlin.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I'm joking. Thank you over there. Awesome. Yeah. Welcome. So, okay, I think we're moving on to announcements.
We are. So, as you know, we do SVVR monthly. Usually it's on the third Thursday of the month. You'll notice this is either the third of the month or Thursday. So every now and then it is. But next month, in March, because there is so much other stuff going on, we are not going to have a traditional meetup like this. But what we do have is a few other things, which may or may not work here. There we go. That's how much nerd I am.
Microsoft researchers started to build the holodeck.
Yeah. Well, so I was very excited about when they came out with Kinect for the Xbox. That to me was going to be the holodeck. We'll get there eventually. So I'm going to throw these things up here in a moment, but we'll move on for now. So these are going to be QR codes. So what is happening in March, as many of you probably know, is there is GDC coming up. SVVR is not doing an official party there or anything, but we have been, Danae has been talking to the folks who organized the SF Game Dev big party that they did at Midway last year. They're doing it at DNA this year, much smaller venue. They are still evaluating folks to have tables there. It's $100, I think, right? Folks from SVVR will be looked at with priority. So you can talk to DNA if you're interested in demoing there. DNA is a club if you've not been there, so there might be some issues with darkness and whatever, but we'll figure it out. And Mike has actually done VR stuff in that venue before, so he can
Yes, the owner is a friend.
Yeah, and we will put this QR code up here just to sign up for the party. It is free. It is going to sell out. So if you are at all interested in going, I would recommend that you sign up now.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, last year there was close to around 2,000 people attending this, both at DNA Lounge and the Midway. And I think from what I saw, there was probably just one VR demo among the entire in the 60 demos, right? I think that's the reason why they spoke to them to see, can we have either dedicated space for VR or at least have it there? So it looks like they're going to have around 30 demo tables this time. They're going to give us some preference if people want to do on SVVR. So especially when we sign up for the demo tables, it's highly recommended that we mention SVVR in the comment section, and we can always follow up there. The second piece is if they have more signups on for VR, he might carve out a separate space inside the DNA Lounge. Again, it depends on the thing, but we were quite disappointed last year that there's only one VR in the entire thing, so we would love to see more games to be demoed this time.
Yes, I think we poached him and made him speak here, if I remember correctly.
So the party QR code is here on the right. And then we also have Work Jam, as I mentioned earlier, is coming up on March 8th. That's across the bottom. The best place to keep in touch with us is always going to be Discord. Discord.gg/SVVR. Sorry.
I would highly recommend that if anybody is interested in demoing with Vinay, upcoming for this party, that we carve out a channel on the Discord to collaborate and coordinate for the demo attendees. I am more than happy to do that.
Cool. And then right here in this room and various other places around the campus, we are helping host the Genius Dev Camp. For those of you who remember last year when the Apple Vision Pro first came out, these guys had done a hackathon here over the weekend. This year it is a little more focused on AI, but also AR, XR, however you want to talk about it. And they've given us a generous 25% off registration for SVVR members. There is even a deeper discount for students. So if you are a student, let us know, and we will also be publicizing that through the campus newsletter. But so Don here is the organizer, so I'm going to let him talk a little bit about it.
Thank you so much. I recognize some of you, and I'm happy to welcome all of you to this room in about 3 weeks, where we'll have a super hackathon. It's a cooperative idea contest. Most people think of a hackathon like it's a competition, but this is really, I think some folks can speak from experience, much more inclusive and empowering to everybody. And we celebrate diversity. So those are the main principles of the event. And we want designers, we want storytellers, and we want developers in the room to form teams and build something in the 48 hours we have from Friday, the 14th of March at 5 p.m. till Sunday at 6 p.m. when we finish the judging and the awards. The judges will be very well-known VCs in Silicon Valley, some of my best friends who backed my company, and also been angels in the community. And they're to give feedback, but also potentially get you on your way. We also, in addition to SVVR, have community sponsors like Startup Labs, which will take your idea with you, de-risk it in terms of team, TAM, and tech, and get you a 3-month gauntlet through that to shipping, basically. So that's part of it. It's an 18-year tradition that has been started right after iPhone launched. It's led to amazing projects in public companies like Square and GetAround. Open source like OAuth became a working group at our event back in 2008. And many other things like our sponsors, TestFlight became bought by Apple. Other companies that have gone on to become successful companies that are exited into the major Silicon Valley institutions that I won't name drop because it's embarrassing. But sincerely, a great tradition, and I really want to welcome everybody because it's about the new platform we're debuting there about foundational AI that performs experiments, that actually takes data in and gives you refined data out based on user behavior, and I can explain later. But if you check out this Discord, the QR code, you'll see more about what it's good for. But what I wanted to say just for a moment is that we really want all kinds of applications. And I was just talking with some game developers here. Where do they go? Raise your hand. There you are. About what could be possible where you take unstructured data in and you get like your favorites out of it, or you get a hand-picked and refined set of data out of it. Because this is very good at matchmaking recommendations and also sifting through large amount of unstructured data. Now, why am I mentioning this at an AR/VR meetup? Well, because last time we did this, it was incredible. The density of applications that came from the crowd. We had 120 people, we had 36 demos. That's actually the highest number of demos per person I've ever had in an event. I've been doing these for years. I had 30 events. I've never seen anything like that. So I want these people, I want you people at the event to do that again, because this is an awesome thrill. And we're taking it pretty seriously in terms of inclusion and diversity. We're reaching out to student groups, reaching out to different groups involved in the area, bringing people in from Australia, Israel, the East Coast, the West Coast. I think there's a person flying in from Dubai. I haven't checked. But the group is growing. We'd love to have you, and especially if you are not a coder, or if you have a lot of skills, you know, be a mentor. I'm bringing in mentors from all disciplines. So just come, hang out. It's your ticket includes 6 meals, so you'll be well fed. My children won't be there, but I'm happy to introduce you to Freya and Wilder here, my latest recruits. But yeah, my name is Dominic, and I'll be here all evening. And to talk about more, just thank you very much. That was great. Oh yeah. So you get a free ticket if you would like to help, and that could be any day of the 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I need people working the door, and I need folks to help me give food away and potentially clean up after. But it's a simple job, but I'm happy to help people, and then you'll become my I like to really give back to the community, and one of those things I like to do is help and mentor, so you have my full support if you decide to volunteer and be part of our community as an honored volunteer. So volunteers have gone on to sell their companies. FYI. So cool. That's it. Thank you very much.
If you guys we normally have community announcements, so if you'd like to come up and tell people what you're working on, if you have a demo here tonight that you want to talk about, if you're looking for help, if you're looking for a job, if you're hiring, any of those things, come on up and we'll give you the mic.
On the light switches, could you hit the top button?
Doesn't have to be fancy.
I'm going to Burning Man for the first time this year, and after wanting to forever. So Al and we're going to be showing, I'm going to be showing my data visualization stuff, probably around climate change or something fabulous. Anybody's going to Burning Man and wants to chat, I will chat.
Yeah, not the tablet, the light switch panel.
Anyone else? No? If not, oh, you do.
Hi everyone, I'm Richard, your local VR samurai. I've got some VR katanas in case anybody wants to see what that looks like. I also recently built in 1 week a little VR samurai experience, like music rhythm. And I'd like people to come and give it a try and give me your feedback. Thank you.
Cool, well enjoy, we have the stream for another hour. We still have pizza, we have drinks, and hopefully you guys all meet the folks that you haven't met yet. And thank you to Angel and Kate. Great.
Thanks.